Best of r/malicious compliance episode 42. Not my story, but a family member's from when he worked for the FDA, Food and Drug Administration, so details may be a little fuzzy. Also, first time posting, not entirely sure if it fits. TL. Doctor at the bottom. A while ago, he knew a guy who we'll call Rick back when they worked for the FDA. At the time, and maybe still today, who knows, the FDA had a policy that whoever approved a drug application, which were all hard copies at the time, needed to manually sign off on the application to ensure they knew what they were doing. Otherwise it was the kind of violation that other, much nastier parts of the government would immediately get involved in. If anyone is wondering why this was such a big deal, look up Francis Kelsey and the whole thalidomide crisis. One day Rick gets an application on his desk, but it doesn't even follow the proper application procedures, so there's absolutely no way he can approve it. It's his last day before vacation, so he decides to leave it and formally reject it once he's back. A week or two later, Rick gets back from vacation to find out that, much to his surprise, the application has been approved, ostensibly by him. Now obviously this is impossible, so he does some digging and asks around, only to find out that his own boss has approved it for some reason, but didn't manually sign off on it. He takes the hard copy application to his boss's office and requests to know why the boss approved it under his name when it wasn't even filled out correctly. Boss is evasive and refuses to give a proper answer, and basically laughs Rick off when Rick tries to tell him that he's not on board with a clearly incorrect application getting approved under his name. Now Rick is a good employee, and so of course he's obliged to follow the rules. The rules say that because the boss never manually signed off, this needs to be reported. But Rick is also a nice guy, and he doesn't want to report his boss and get him in trouble without giving his boss a chance to fix it without getting investigated for the serious violation it is. Even though this is only the latest incident in a history of his boss not appreciating Rick's expertise. So Rick decides to send an email to his boss's bosses. In fact, he sends an email to his entire department informing them of his boss's mistake, kindly letting them know that as per the rules, he will be informing Congress, yes, that Congress of the violation, as the rules actually state he should do. Is it overkill? Probably. But the drug application is immediately rescinded and Rick's boss gets rapidly hustled into a meeting with all his bosses. This isn't the first time Rick's been treated poorly despite being a valuable employee, so he retires a week later, and, due to the FDA's retirement policies, gets government health insurance and a stipend for the rest of his life because of how long he's worked for them. Boss was retired fairly soon after as well, but without the benefits, if you know what I mean. TL. Doctor, FDA boss approves unapprovable drug application under Rick's name while Rick is on vacation. Rick lets his whole department know that he's supposed to tell Congress about his boss's decision, and said decision is very quickly undone. Thank you. Next. In my school, there had been a tradition of riding things down the hallway for senior pranks. First they did skateboards, then scooters, bikes and eventually a motorcycle. It was my year to graduate, and I wanted to leave my mark, or at least have a rule made because of myself. For my senior project at the Voltage Center, I had been working on a pneumatic ping pong shooter robot that was built on the old frame of a robot from our robotics team's previous years. This thing was about 140 pounds, and strong enough to pull me. I proceeded to tie a little cart behind it that I sat on, wirelessly hooked it up to my laptop and rode down the hallway at about 10 miles an hour, firing off the empty shooting mechanism. After I hit the other side of the building, right in front of the office, the vice principal came out of her office, absolutely furious, and made me put it back in the robotics room. She called my mother after. I wanted to let you know this happened, but I can't get him in trouble since he didn't break any rules. My mom just laughed as she knew I was going to do it. Thank you. Next. Short and sweet high school compliance. Written on mobile. Please enjoy. When I was in high school I was pretty angsty and not much into fashion. As a result I had a wardrobe that basically only had black, grey, and navy. Despite being the people that bought me those clothes, my parents were annoyed. You should wear color. Why won't you wear more color? Your clothes are too dark. You should wear something brighter. When I was a senior I got my own job and could buy some of my own clothes. My favorite place to shop was Goodwill. One day I found a pair of ugly convict orange corduroy pants that fit me like a glove. I decided to buy them. From there I kept acquiring more and more ugly convict orange clothing items. Items that ranged from neon to hurts your eyes to look at them bright, all in convict orange. I also wore them constantly. During the next few months I had lots of people, relatives, church members, etc. ask me why I was wearing clothing that was an affront to the eyes. I gladly told them that my parents were tired of my dark clothes and wanted me to wear something brighter and more colorful. It's been 10 years and no one complains about my clothing choices anymore. Thank you. Next. This story was originally meant for r/tales from tech support, but due to their rules, it wasn't allowed to be posted there. It's kind of a mix between revenge and a tech support call. TLDR at bottom. A bit of background. I own a web hosting and MSP company which I've set up 2 years ago with some friends with similar interest. We have a few serious clients, but things have been sailing smoothly and quietly for some time. We're not a big company and we only spend a few hours a week doing actual work for it. So we have phone support. Even though nobody is almost ever physically at a desk when we get a call, we only get calls maybe twice a week. We pick up, walk to a PC or grab a laptop in the meantime. Sometimes it takes a minute after picking up the phone before we can actually help. Most of our clients know this and have no problem with it at all. We usually provide quick solutions and most of the time we do support for free. The actors. Me, obviously. Karen, angry lady, client company's administrative person. She was just hired 2 weeks ago. Boss, client boss that I've had regular contact with. The story. Me, insert standard corporate greeting. Karen, hi, with Karen from company, I have issues sending email. Me, I'm sorry to hear that. If you give me a second I'll walk to my desk so I can look into it. Now, it's important to note that we know most contacts from the bigger clients and are on a first name basis with most. Although we are not a big company, we provide services tailored to our clients' specific needs. As such, we have regular conversations over email discussing their services. This was the first time I spoke with Karen since she got hired recently. Karen, why aren't you at your desk already? This is urgent and I need this sorted ASAP. Not paying you for your time if you're slow and unhelpful. Me, screams internally already. Me, I'm sorry Karen, I am just now arriving at my desk. I see you've been recently added to the mall system. Is this the first time you've tried sending an email from your Karen interrupts me. No, I've sent many emails, probably more than you. I know how to send an email, okay? Me, possibly sounding a bit annoyed. I was going to ask, is this the first time you tried to send an email from your corporate email account? Karen, yes, it is. Why? Me, could you tell me what email client you're using? Karen, I'm using my company's webmail client. Me, alright, that's good. Did you get any error message that you can tell me? Karen, yes, I don't know what it is and I am not at my desk right now. Give me a minute to look it up. IDK, why she wouldn't stay at her desk after giving me shit for it earlier. Karen, okay, so the error messages, says her interpretation of the error without saying the actual error. The part where I jumped the gun and should have paid more attention. Me, it sounds like your inbox is full. Your company has a 50 GB shared mailbox limit. I can up the limit to 60 GB for the rest of the month so you can continue to use the email system while you archive some old mails by printing physical copies or move them to your company's cloud storage. Karen, I don't want to archive my email. Me, alternatively boss could order extra storage for email. It isn't that big of a change in cost. It should be well within the budget. Karen, I would rather archive my email then. This is where finally my bell starts to ring and I decide to check on the usage report, and sure enough disk usage spiked over the last 2 weeks or so, for her mailbox only. So I decided to ask some questions to get better insights into what is really going on. Me, have you been getting any spam mails recently? Karen, yes, a lot of these non-deliverable have been popping up in my mailbox since I got hired. I was meaning to call for that too, but I've just been so busy that I just delete them. I delete about 250 of them every morning. Note, our system caps the sender's limit for email accounts to 250 a day to prevent our system from being used by spammers. You may see where this is going. Me. Oh, that's not good. And this has been going on since you were hired? Karen. Yes, it's really annoying. Please do something about it. Me. I will look into it now. Please stay on the line while I put you on hold. I dig up the SMTP log for her user account and sure enough, every day for the past 2 weeks or so at 0 hours 250 emails are sent. Like clockwork, most of the sent emails return as non-deliverable mail due to spam flags. Now, this is a mailbox that they use for their administration, meaning they get their invoices and appointments in there. She recently gained access rights to the mailbox, which is when things started to go wrong. Me. Hi Karen, are you still on the line? Karen's phone, please hold music. In the meantime I start investing further. I change her password and gather everything I can find from our system regarding Karen administration mailbox and normal user mailbox. 20 minutes pass without the holding music taking a break. It's really annoying, so I hang up and call back. Boss picks up. This is where things start to go to shit. For Karen. Boss, insert client's corporate greeting. Me. My corporate greeting. I was just at the phone with Karen. I think her mailboxes might have been compromised for the past 2 weeks. Boss, oh, that's interesting. I'm with Karen right now. She has been in my office for the past 20 minutes telling me how you were rude to her and that you refused to help her, and that we should find a different company for our IT needs. Me. I'm sorry for any inconveniences that I may have caused. However, a hacked administration mailbox is a very pressing matter. I have spent the past half hour digging through logs and I've come to the conclusion that almost directly since Karen was hired, spam started to be sent from the inbox. I think she might have used a weak password. Boss, alright, hold on. Boss, returns from a 5-minute hold. Okay, so I have asked Karen about this and she used generic dog name as her password. What does need to be done to take care of this issue? We do enforce a default password policy for all accounts on our systems. Our clients can disable this for email accounts by checking a box on the email account. Since Karen is their company's administrator, she was also tasked with creating and deleting email accounts for their colleagues. She edited her own email account to allow for insecure passwords. Her dog's name obviously didn't match the requirements and she thought it was unfair for another company to dictate what password she could use for her corporate email account. Me. Well, I have spent the past half hour looking for information regarding this breach. It is evident that spam has been sent from corporate domain. I cannot find any evidence that the hackers accessed mail in the mailboxes. However, I cannot conclude that they didn't either. Boss, so you're saying they may have our entire administrative archive due to Karen's poor judgment calls for passwords? Me. That is basically what it boils down to. Unfortunately, there is no way to know this for sure. We don't log access to specific mails or folders. Only authentication attempts, sent mail and received mail. I have no way of knowing if they downloaded or looked at any of your mail. I would advise you to change all passwords of every account with every site and system you use, just to be sure this doesn't result in any further breaches. Boss, that will take ages. I'll task Karen and some others to start doing this directly. Me. Well, we use a corporate password manager. This might be a nice solution for your company as well, as it would allow for you and your colleagues to store passwords securely and give extensive permissions to who can see which passwords. It'll also allow you to easily keep track of all accounts that your company has, and since you don't have to memorize the passwords, you can use different and very secure passwords for everything without any issues. Boss, yes, please. Will you put an order in for me? I need this for all my employees. Me. Will do. Anything else I can help you with? Boss, yes, I need some accounts terminated, but I'll send them to you in a bit. Need to wrap things up here first. About 30 minutes later I received a termination request for all of Karen's accounts. She apparently heard what boss said about her having to change all the company passwords and she refused. She was fired on the spot. TLDR. Angry lady decides password policies are not important and uses extremely weak password on corporate accounts. Email box got hacked and possibly all of their mail archives was compromised. Tried to blame it on my company and got fired for her recklessness and lies. Edit. Switched from acronyms to names. Update. I just now received a call on my personal cell from the boss. I believe I once gave it to him for an on-site job at his house back when I was just getting started. He thanked me for my directness and not actually trying to fight the claims of Karen over the phone. As outgoing phone calls are recorded from my client's side, the recording was able to be used as evidence in support of her termination, so she has no chance of trying to fight it and couldn't argue outside pressure caused her to get fired, as that is illegal in my country. I told him that I was happy to take care of all their business needs and hung up, feeling satisfied with my work for today. Thank you. Next. Since it's winter in the northern hemisphere and we are getting our fair share of snow, I have a story from my aunt. My aunt lives in a gated community in the PNW. She's at a higher altitude, so she gets a bit of snow. She is a nice lady, very active and always helps other people. Her is a drinking club as she describes them, have a whole bunch of rules, some totally ridiculous, heavily enforced and always changing. Usually when rules are changed they get posted on some online community bulletin board from the days of dial-up. Also they like to fine and shame people. My aunt never attended meetings because she has no time for drinking and cigarettes. As per usual with a lot of bylaws, you have to clear the sidewalk in front of your house of snow and ice. My aunt, being the woman she is, and living in a 55+ community, she always shovels her walk and salts it for ice. A couple years ago there was a heavier than usual snowfall, maybe over 20 inches in the higher elevations, with some warm days then freezing temperatures for a few days after. So first snowfall, she gets up early and shovels her sidewalk and her walk and sprinkles down some salt. It snows a few inches more, so in the later afternoon she shovels the walk again and decides to salt again. She literally said she tossed a few handfuls of salt and a neighbor across the street comes running out demanding she stops salting and it's a violation of her rule, whatever crap. It seems that a no salt rule was added to their book of great her rules. Reasoning is that salt crystals are unsightly, and posted on the unusable online bulletin board from 1999. Which at this point the online bulletin board had been replaced by an under maintenance error page for the past few months. So there was no way the drunken her rule changes could be relayed to the commoners. Well, my aunt apologizes, gets a warning for the first time she salted and a second for the handful of salt she applied in the second salting, and then gets another warning for not properly clearing the sidewalk. Well, my aunt left maybe a strip about 2 to 3 inches for about 2 feet on the edge of her sidewalk which wasn't properly cleared of snow. Not a big deal, she made an excellent effort, but the her neighbor didn't think so. Next violation would be a fine. Also she had to clean up all the rock salt with a broom. My aunt ended up getting the new her rules and writing from the her neighbor, which she read over and realized they only stated salt in the sidewalk snow shoveling rule, but nothing that blue salt free ice melt. Also was stated is that the sidewalk should stay free of ice at all times. Also she read a bit deeper to learn that street and sidewalk cleaning is covered by the HOA twice a year or as needed. Instead of risking her wrath of fines and some public shaming because now it's near impossible to prevent the sidewalk from freezing up, she decides she will challenge the vodka-induced reasoning of the HOA and will use the blue non-salt ice melt to keep her sidewalk ice-free. The next day after an overnight snowfall, she heads to the local hardware store to buy some blue non-salt ice melt. Strikes up a conversation with the shop owner about her issue, who recommends these blue ice melting pellets and throws in a bag of clay kitty litter on the house so she can stick it to them idiots. That afternoon the temp rises just above freezing and there is a heavy wet snowfall of a few inches which hits the ground wet, melts and refreezes when temperatures go below freezing at nighttime. So instead of risking having a skating rink for a sidewalk, she clears the wet snow and then dumps a bunch of these blue ice melting pellets and a whole bunch of kitty litter. Overnight it freezes. Next day she has the most ice-free sidewalk in all of the neighborhood and it's covered in ice melt pellets. Well, it rains that day. Her use of kitty litter and blue ice melt pellets don't go unnoticed by her neighbor. That afternoon she is fined by the HOA officer in charge of fines for breaking rule vodka section, stale cigarette smoke. She sees nothing wrong. The road is salted and sanded and looks like a mess, so her sidewalk doesn't look too bad, all blue and grey speckled and ice free. Then gets a notice to clean up the salt, which she ignores because it's not salt she is using to de-ice her sidewalk but blue salt free ice melt pellets and clay kitty litter. Then that day it rained, then froze and continued to rain, then snow, causing everything to be covered in ice and snow the next morning. It was a disaster. My aunt cleared the snow from her sidewalk and applied more blue pellets and kitty litter. which wasn't a task because luckily she already had applied so much that there was already no ice on her sidewalk or snow. Everyone else in the neighborhood had to chip the underlayer of ice after they risked a horrific fall while clearing the top layer of snow. She then was fined again, while neighbors had to actually walk in the messy street in some parts because sidewalks in some spot were unwalkable. Warnings and fines were given to other unsuspecting neighbors who couldn't attend the Hoa booze meetings and had mistakenly used salt or had not chipped and cleared all the sidewalk ice in an acceptable amount of time. The next few days were blue skies and below freezing with ice everywhere. Sidewalks had been chipped but iced up over time with a thin layer of slick ice called black ice. People were falling and my aunt now had a couple rogue neighbors using all types of non-salt ice melt. One guy made a solution of brine and molasses which he sprayed on and got great results. Others used sand, brine, non-salt ice melters and even 15 gallons of wine which turned to vinegar was applied. The Hoa's alcohol consumption probably increased as the officer fell on a patch of black ice out front of his home, breaking his elbow while returning from delivering fines, warnings and general nastiness. Eventually the weather returned to above freezing levels and rain which washed away all the various ice melting substances. The rogue neighbors gathered at my aunt's house enjoying tea and snacks. Amongst them was the man who used brine and molasses, who happened to have a license to practice law and was retired with nothing else better to do than to ruin the drunk useless Hoa at the next meeting. He then invited himself to the next meeting with a file folder of all the fines and warnings with a statement of dispute for each one. Also brought his tablet to prove the online bulletin board wasn't working, which helped the case that the Hoa wasn't providing proper means of communication to the residents, which meant the residents could sign a petition to fire the standing Hoa members and appoint an interim Hoa till the election. My aunt was appointed treasurer, found the previous regime spent Hoa funds at the liquor store, the retired lawyer president who then went after the previous Hoa for funds spent on booze, and they lived happily ever after. Thank you. Next. Brief and not very malicious, I guess. Last semester, I worked as a teaching assistant. We were supposed to use this new online system to clock in and out, but at the beginning, I would often forget to clock in because I would be so busy helping with setup. Can't clock in earlier than the class actually starts. The professor I worked with asked how she can support me as a first-time TA, and I asked if she could remind me to clock in. She told me she could do her best, but that it would probably be better if I set an alarm for myself. Okay, no problem. I set an alarm on my phone for a few minutes before the class began. I am deaf. My professor is not. Every morning, a little before class, your phone is going off. Whoops, thank you. This was how I reminded myself to clock in before class for the 2 weeks before it became habit and I could remember to do it. Thank you. Next. Read another compliance story that reminded me of this. /TLDR at the end. Back in the early 2000s I was working as a government contractor to a military client. Overall, a good job. Unlike most of these jobs, these paid per hour instead of salary. Important later. I didn't question it when hired as I was told it was a 40-hour-a-week job. I came in at 100 and left at 1700 with an hour for lunch. A little background on contracting in general. It's not 100% accurate, but enough that you get the point. A contractor works for a company that has an agreement, or contract, with a government agency. Often, the company is referred to as the contractor as opposed to me, a contractor. Big C, little c, C, I see. The contractor has a manager, A, K, A, I boss, who works closely with the government representative, A, K, A, the person responsible for overseeing the contractor to ensure everything gets done. A contractor doesn't technically work for the government representative, but that's not how it works in the real world. In this case, the government representative drove my workload on a daily basis. Fortunately he left me alone most of the time because he knew that I knew what I was doing. He had no idea how to do what he hired me to do, and he had other problems to deal with. It took about a week before the nice government representative reverts into hothead manager. My boss had warned me about this, so it wasn't unexpected. It didn't really cause me any issues as I just avoided him when his heat was on. It also helped that he had some weird working hours, important later. Coming into office until noon and leaving at 2100. We suspected it was issues with his wife, but left it alone. Fast forward a couple of months and I attend a routine meeting with my boss and hothead manager to review the monthly reports for my team, accomplishments, issues, future planning, etc. This is the only time hothead manager reviews contract related activity. The meeting goes as usual, and when my boss asks if there's anything else we need to discuss, hothead manager says that he thinks that the contractors are padding their hours. We, of course, want to know who so that we can investigate and address the issue. He says, all of them. Note, I'm one of those them. I managed to remain calm, and after a few minutes of questions, we ask how he would like the contractor to handle the situation. His response, have everyone here when I get here and leave after I leave. I diplomatically remind him of his unpredictable schedule and how problematic that would be. He doesn't back off and we agree to his new terms, with the signed requirements document, of course. See where this is going yet? MC in 3, 2, 1. I informed all of my team members that they would now report to work at 0600 and would not be able to leave until hothead manager had been gone for 5 minutes. I was the first in and last out every day. So much overtime was racked up that next month, my team averaged 65 hours per week for the entire month. That means every team member billed an average of 77.5 hours a week, nearly double the usual 40. During the next monthly meeting, I placed the new requirements document the hothead manager had signed on top of the handouts, page 1. Then we went over the massive list of tasks the team has accomplished that month. Hothead manager was very impressed and congratulated us on a job well done. Then we turned the page to monthly costs and hothead went nuclear. My boss and I sat through a 10-minute rampage. Papers thrown. Stomping out of the room. Incoherent screaming. Once he calmed down and was a shade of red that we humans have a name for, he asked to authorize all the overtime. I said, if you turn to page 1 of the handouts, you'll see that you did. He sat there for a good 3 minutes staring at the table before signing off on the monthly reports. He said nothing. The new requirements were rescinded that afternoon. /TLDR hothead manager says that hourly contractors have to be there before he arrives and can't leave until he does. Contractors rack up massive overtime for an entire month before policy is rescinded. Edit. Woot. Reddit gold. Thank you, kind stranger. Now for the homework portion, as I have to figure out what it's for. Edit. For clarification, hothead's schedule was erratic and he never told anyone, even his second in command. All we knew was that he never came in before 0630, so we came in at 0600 to comply with being there before him.